Hey guys, today I'm in Edinburgh for the Edinburgh International Film Festival. It's my second time being here. I came a few years ago, and so far I've seen about 12 films, and I've been here for about 2.5 days, which I think is pretty good. My lovely camera woman of today is my friend Erin, who has seen all these films with me. Say hi, Erin.
Hi.
She's a bit shy. She may or may not be doing ratings, we shall see. Okay, the first film we saw was called Pluto, which was a Korean film set in a school about how the students are competing for the top 10 places academically in the school and how that kind of leads to violence. I quite like the way it started because it starts off a teenager being murdered, and there's kind of two parallel stories going on really, as one is the police officers interviewing people and trying to find out who killed the boy, and the other one is the events leading up to the boy's murder, so it kind of all coincides and meshes nicely. There weren't many sympathetic characters really. Some were quite interesting. The boy who was murdered right at the beginning, as you go back and find out more about him, he does turn out to be quite sympathetic, whereas kind of the other main character, well, most of them aren't that sympathetic at all, because choices are like presented to them. They don't really take the way out, they just continue being horrible. You can quite see a social commentary in it about how exams are so important in schools all around the world, and how there is that pressure on teenagers and children from such an early age to do well in exams, even though not all students may be that way academically. Yeah, I think it was a very good one to start off here at Edinburgh, and I would give Pluto 5 out of 5 because I really did enjoy it, and it was quite a good thriller, and I really got into it, and I was really looking forward to seeing what was happening next and how it would all pan out. Erin, would you like to do a rating?
Oh yes, please. I think I'd give it, I really enjoyed it. It has actually been my favourite film of the festival so far, I think. I'd probably give it 4 out of 5 though, just because I felt some scenes really did drag on, like without giving anything away for the ending. I felt the ending really dragged on, but that could just come down to sort of cultural differences with filmmaking traditions. I'm not entirely sure whether it needed sort of 3 endings as such, but having said that, I really, really did enjoy it. So yeah, 4 out of 5.
There we go. The second film we saw that day was called Shooting Bigfoot, which was a UK film, which was about a British filmmaker. He went with his camera, just a camera, to America and followed 3 separate groups of Bigfoot hunters, and it was how they went and camped out in the woods and what sort of happened on those 3 trips. And I won't lie, I kind of fell asleep for about 10 minutes in it because we had to get up at 6 a.m, and by that time it was about 4 in the afternoon. I was a bit tired, so I probably missed about 10 minutes. But saying that, I don't think I missed much narrative wise. I got what was going on, and I think it was quite clever in a way. It did interest me. Some bits were quite funny, some bits made me jump, but I think it was a bit problematic in a way, because there's 3 narratives in a sense. He's with 3 different groups of people. Only one seems to have a definitive ending, whereas the other 2 sort of fizzle out to nothing, so you don't really know how those 2 other trips ended. Because obviously Bigfoot, whether you believe in Bigfoot or not, those who don't, it's quite easy to ridicule those who do, and in the film some of the groups seem to be very easy to make fun of and seemed quite like that was their purpose, for you as the audience to laugh at them, which I didn't think was too fair, because obviously these people really do believe in Bigfoot, and whatever beliefs you may have, whether in like different religions or in sort of something which may be a myth or a legend and turn out to be false, I don't think it's fair to laugh at people for that. So yeah, while I enjoyed Shooting Bigfoot, I think there was problems with it. Overall I would give it 3 out of 5.
Which was different from what you gave it in the audience award, wasn't it?
I gave it 4 out of 5 beforehand, but then it was thinking back over, I was thinking, actually, I didn't like it that much.
I agree. I felt put on the spot by the audience award. I think that was it. I felt a pressure to give it, like, to be very positive. It's the first one that we did as well.
Next film we saw that day was Comrade Kim Goes Flying, which was a North Korean film about a young woman that was from on a countryside village, from a mining family. She was a miner, coal miner, and she always dreamed of being an acrobat and a trapeze artist in the circus. She always wanted to fly, and it's about how she tries to turn her dream into reality and the setbacks and things. It was quite a sweet, entertaining film. It was kind of like a fairy tale. I thought it was very pretty. There was also animation put into it, which was very pretty. Apparently it was like North Korean art, just animated, and I quite liked that. That was quite pretty, and how it kind of showed her journey, and it was the way the certain places it was inserted, I thought was pretty good. I'd also give that 3 out of 5 because while it was entertaining, it hasn't been my favourite. A bit sort of hit and miss in a way, because while there was a lot of sort of believe in yourself, there was also the thing about like do it for the working class, so there did seem to be some political elements in it.
It's slightly insidious in that respect. I thought I've been thinking on that word a lot actually, of how to describe that film. Politically very sort of insidious type of power operating in that.
No, so I think I'd give Comrade Kim Goes Flying 3 out of 5. And the final film we saw on the first day was called The Complex, which was a Japanese horror film. And I'm not good with horror, anything scares me, so stuff did scare me in that film. And it made me jump, and I kind of hid a bit because I'm easily freaked out. The way I will describe it is this: a young girl moves into a block of flats, and then she starts getting haunted, basically. And there turns out to be more ghosts than humans. Like, half the time you meet these characters and they're not actually living, which was a bit weird. It kind of went on a bit as well. It seemed to be like many endings or many points it could have ended, but it just kept going and getting more and more crazy and adding more and more ghosts and threats. Because as soon as you think one kind of ghost is dealt with, another one would come along and turn out to be the really bad ghost. I am easily scared, so I did jump a lot. So for that, I'd probably give it 3 out of 5 since it did scare me in some places.
I think that's a very generous rating. I'm really impressed by you. That's so charitable. That's what that is.
I think it's because I don't watch horror, so I have no standard for horror.
Point of reference.
Very easily scared. Day 2, we saw 5 films, which, that's pretty good going. The first one we saw was You Want Me to Kill Him, which was a British film, a thriller based on a true story, which in some ways is quite incredible, like how you think about the events in this film. How could they be real? It's about a teenage boy. He has a sort of online relationship with this girl who turns out to be one of his school friends' sisters, and she has an abusive relationship, and he wants to get her away from that, and then different events happen. I quite enjoyed it. The cast, especially the young cast, were all unknowns, or at least I haven't seen them before, and I thought they were all really good. As it went on, it kind of got more unbelievable, but then it is based on a true story, and at the end they tell you some of the facts about what happened. And that, in a way, makes the whole film unbelievable, but then it was real life that's so unbelievable. So I definitely recommend that one, because, it was quite crazy in a way, but I really enjoyed that, and I'd give that one 4 out of 5.
I've got to agree with that rating, actually. I thought it was a really good film, but as well in terms of how social media is still so dangerous, we're more visible, I guess, than ever before in so many ways, and yet also at the same time quite concealed, because we can come across as whoever we want to be. So we might be on every social media platform and whatever, and we kind of have that same trust in other people that they are who they say they are, but that still very much exists, that's not the case.
Next film we saw was called The East. I think that in Britain anyway is going to get a general release, which I think it does deserve. It's an American film about a woman from a security company goes undercover in a eco-terrorist group, as they are sometimes known as, to try and find out their targets so that she can warn the people that her company works for, her security company works for. And then it's sort of seeing how they live, and you kind of end up as a viewer as well kind of agreeing with terrorists, even though they're kind of sometimes harming people, but they're harming people who are already harming others. In a sense, it reminds me in a way a bit like some of the people they were against were, for instance, in Erin Brockovich, there's the water company, and it was that sort of thing. And then there's talk about waste, how we as people waste food because they would go rummage around in garbage cans and find half a pizza left in there, and it's perfectly edible, but no one wanted any more, so they threw it away. It does bring up a lot of thoughts about us as a people and what we're doing to the planet and how we waste stuff. The cast I thought were very good. It included Alexander Skarsgård, Ellen Page and Britt Marling, and all of them were very good, as well as the supporting cast. But yes, the director, there was a Q&A after the East, and there's been Q&As after a few of the films we see, and the director of the East, who I can't quite remember his name, but he also wrote the film with Britt Marling. I thought he was one of the best directors I've seen in a Q&A. He didn't contradict himself or talk himself in circles. He answered every question very well and thought out, and even some of the questions he was definitely put on the spot for, because he said and answered some of them, I've never been asked a question like that before, sorry. He had more of a pause to think about it, so he didn't sort of blow out anything he first thought of.
Unlike some.
He actually considered his answers, which I thought was very good. That kind of in a way made me like the film more, because clearly he knew what he was talking about and knew his own film, which I don't know if it was helped because he also wrote it, not just directed it, because it was kind of his baby. But yeah, I thought he was a very good director in that sense. And I enjoyed The East. It was quite a quiet film in a way. There was no, even though it was a thriller, there was no big chase sequences or big, the soundtrack wasn't sort of that pounding soundtrack you sometimes get with Ridley Scott or Tony Scott's thrillers. It was quite slow paced, quite quiet, but I think that worked. So I would give The East 4 out of 5, I think. Next film I saw that day was called The Battle of the Sexes, which is my favourite film I've seen so far at Edinburgh Film Festival. It was a documentary about the tennis match in the 1970s between Billie Jean King and Bobby Riggs, and it was a tennis match brought about because Bobby Riggs, he, at age 55, saying, men are better than women, I could beat any female tennis player, even the best in the world I could beat. And it's a story of him challenging Billie Jean King and their match and what happened and how that changed history in a way. It wasn't just about that match, it was about the time in general, because in the sort of 60s and 70s, the civil rights movement, a lot of the feminist movement was going on and saying that women should have equal rights. So it was very interesting having the context as well. There was interviews from Billie Jean King, many other tennis players such as Chrissy Everett, and also, while I'm not sure if Bobby Riggs is dead or he just didn't want to be in the film, but they did have his son as well, sort of saying what had happened and how afterwards, how his dad reacted and things, which I thought was quite good, because it obviously, in a sense, you can't change what happened in the match because that is fact, but it's good to have Bobby Riggs's side of the story, because at some points he did come off as a complete bigot, which in a way was like many men in those times, but there was still the counter sort of side that showed that he was still human, he was still a father, things like that. And also I really liked how it went to present times, and there was interviews from current female tennis players such as Maria Sharapova and Venus Williams, and showing the effect that Billie Jean King had on these girls throughout their lives as tennis players, and the effect she's had not only on tennis as a sport and a career, but on wider issues. And I love that film, and I thought it was a very good documentary, and it's been my favourite so far, so that one gets a 5 out of 5. Next film is The Bling Ring, which I don't know if it's out in America yet, but it certainly gets released in Britain in the next few weeks, and I really enjoyed that. Filmed by Sofia Coppola, and the only other film I've seen of hers is The Virgin Suicides, which I really didn't like. I found it very boring, but completely opposite The Bling Ring, I really enjoyed that. The music, the whole soundtrack is made out of things that if you've been out on a night out or anywhere in the past 6 months or a year, you will know it, and I enjoyed that, and all the cast were very believable. I thought Emma Watson was quite good, because her American accent in a way sounded fake, because she sounds like one of those California girls, but she is supposed to, so it was just quite funny. And how these teens reacted to stealing celebrity stuff, but in some ways it's so unbelievable, because they didn't even smash a window to get into these people's houses. For instance, they had Paris Hilton's house keys was under her doormat, so in some ways you're these people are inviting people to rob them. There was a few shots that were a a bit strange, well not strange, but there were quite long lingering shots of, for instance, where they're robbing someone's house and it's just a huge wide shot of the house, because it's got glass windows everywhere, you can see them running around really quickly, so it's just the robbery is like in 3 minutes or less probably, which was a bit strange, but I kind of liked it. The Bling Ring, I definitely recommend going to see that one. Yeah, cast was great, it was funny in its ridiculousness, but then again it's based on a true story, so you kind of got to believe it. And I would give Bling Ring 4 out of 5. The final film we saw that day was Days of Grace, which is a Mexican film, and it was quite interesting because it was 3 parallel stories running at the same time, but you find they've got a lot of connections, and they're set at 3 different World Cups. So the 2002 Japan World Cup, the 2006 Germany World Cup, and the 2010 South African World Cup. So as you're going along, it probably really helps if you actually know what happened in those matches, because then you've got to kind of establish your point in time. You have in the background the radio or television sort of saying a random like score or whatever, or a match between so and so, the quarterfinals and stuff. And sometimes they say, oh, in this South African World Cup, but other times they didn't. Me personally, I could figure out when we were in 2010 because I watched the whole of that World Cup, so I could figure that bit out. Whereas the other ones I was a bit unsure. It was all to do with kidnap and violence and corrupt police officers. And I thought it was very exciting. It was a good film. I think the problem was we were watching it at sort of 9-10 o'clock at night, and there was a lot of shaky cam and like fuzzy focus in the shots. And after watching 4 films previously beforehand, my eyes just could not deal with that much shaky cam, so at times I had to like close my eyes and like give them a rest. But otherwise, like visually it was really interesting, and the way some shots were filmed, like for instance when one guy is kidnapped, a lot of sort of stuff from his point of view, it's like the camera is behind the sort of bag, like canvas bag that's been put over his face, and so it's all fuzzy. It was a fast-paced film. Like I said, it can get a bit confusing at times, having it set in 3 different times, so you don't quite know which story you're in, or you know what character you're with, but then you're trying to remember, did this happen before that event type thing. I liked how it ended a lot, because it kind of ended a bit hopeful, even though Mexico is renowned for its kidnap and violence and stuff. There was sort of, with some of the characters, they seemed to have a second chance, which I quite liked. I'd give Days of Grace 4 out of 5, probably because of the shaky cameras. There was so much of it, it hurt my head after a while. Today we've seen 3 films so far. We're going to see a few more later on this afternoon. First of which we saw is Not Another Happy Ending, which is a British film. It is very British in the sort of comedy aspects and this sort of like rom-com type thing about Amy Pond being a writer, and she gets writer's block, and her publisher's trying to get her out of writer's block by being a bit of an arse. And yeah, so it's quite funny and a bit cheesy. I think it's a very easy watch. It's nothing too taxing, so it was quite nice watching something like that after some of the other films we've seen beforehand, which you definitely do have to focus for. Like I said, it's a bit cheesy and a bit predictable, but if you're looking for something that's not too taxing on your mind, I think that's for you really. But I do like some sort of chick flick type stuff. It's not my biggest love, but I thought it was alright. So yeah, 3 out of 5 for Not Another Happy Ending. The next one we saw was Everyone's Going to Die, which is another British film. I really like that one. I think that's my favourite of today so far. It's about 2 people who meet in a cafe, one of which is a man who is well, you never really find out what he is, but he's kind of a bit like a hitman, or at least it comes across like it. And the other one's a young woman who is a bit of a drifter. She's got a fiance, but she's not really happy. She keeps quitting everything. They meet in a cafe and they form an unlikely friendship. And the whole film is set across one day, near enough. And it's sort of all about family, quite touching in some ways, especially their friendship that grows quite naturally. I have to say, to start with, I wasn't sure what I was going to think of it, because it started a bit slow, and there was lots of sort of just generally wide shots of stuff, and it was very pretty. It's set not by the sea, but then there was an incident with a cat, and after that I kind of fell in love with this film, because then it kind of had that black comedic humour in it, which I quite liked, and a lot of it was quite witty as it went on. It is really about these 2 people and how they connect. and it was quite funny in places and I quite enjoyed it. So I would give Everyone's Going to Die 4 out of 5. The last one we've seen so far today was called Leviathan, and I have to say I wasn't much of a fan. Possibly because I'm pretty sure I fell asleep for about 20 minutes into it, and I wasn't even tired beforehand. I have no excuse. But Leviathan is a documentary set on a huge fishing trawler, and it's, in some ways it's interesting, but other ways, like I say, I fell asleep.
It's got an experimental video vibe to it.
Yeah, because some points it's like a point of view shot thing, so the camera is as if it's someone's face, and because then you see the hands come and moving stuff. And there's very long shots, and sometimes the camera is static and half underwater, so the water's lapping up. In some ways, I suppose you could say it's kind of making you look at overfishing and how the fishing industry works. But others, even though it's a documentary, in my experience of documentaries, there's been like a voiceover. For instance, like in a David Attenborough wildlife documentary, there's always his voice sort of explaining the context or like reinforcing what's going on. But in this, there's nothing. There was hardly even any talking like between the people on board the ship, or there's just background noise and you can't even really hear what they're saying. So it's just the focus on the visuals. So yeah, in some ways I suppose it's quite good, but like I say, I fell asleep, and I would be quite content not having seen that one, so I think that might be my least favourite so far. So for that reason, I would give it 2 out of 5.
I love that your least generous score thus far has just been a 2 out of 5. Like, that's still very good of you.
Yeah.
You just can't do it, can you?
This is why I can't actually be a proper film critic. Yeah. I'm just too nice. I'm back home from Edinburgh Film Festival, so I'm just going to quickly talk about the 5 other films I saw in Edinburgh. I saw Magic, which is a film from Chile starring Juno Temple, Michael Cera and Emily Browning, and I thought they were amazing. Their performances were great, the entire cast was really good. Especially Michael Cera. I'm not a big fan of his, like the comedy stuff he does. I'm not a big fan of that comedy genre anyway. It wasn't just a comedy role, it was quite dramatic and he was suitably creepy. So I thought he was pretty good. The plot of the film is that Juno Temple's character, she goes to see her cousin, played by Emily Browning, who's staying with some friends in Chile, and they go off to this remote island for like a holiday. But Juno Temple's character, she can't sleep, and due to sleep deprivation, she's getting more and more paranoid about the people she's staying with. And she also feels quite isolated because they all speak Spanish, whereas she doesn't. And it's sort of her slowly losing grip on reality. I would totally be creeped out by her cousin's friends. They were very odd, all of them. I suppose I'd call it a thriller. And I really enjoyed it up till the ending. I think I'm not alone when saying it, the entire audience, when it sort of just ended and we were like, oh, what just happened there? Because there was no, like some films where they do sort of leave it open-ended, I quite like, but this one, it was such a sudden, abrupt stop that, yeah, you kind of was like, oh. And it kind of, like, even though I've enjoyed like the previous hour or so of the film, that ending put a downer on it for me. So, yeah, because of the ending, I'd give Magic 3 out of 5. Another film we saw that day was Longing for the Rain, which was a Chinese film about a woman who's married and got a young daughter, and she's quite happy in her life in a way, but she's a bit like sexually unfulfilled. Her husband just plays on his iPad rather than pays attention to her. She starts having these dreams about having sex with a man, and it turns out this man is a ghost, so she's having ghost sex. And she goes to different people, like different sort of spiritualists and stuff, to find out what's going on. And one says he's evil and will bring about death and doom on her entire family. Another one says that he is her husband from a previous life and is trying to use her to be reincarnated. I thought it was good, but I don't think I actually liked it. I also think the ending was quite, in a sense, it was kind of overlong. At other points it could have ended. And while I think it was interesting, I didn't really like it, so I would give Longing for the Rain 3 out of 5. On the final day we saw 3 films. First film I saw was called Motorway, which is a Hong Kong action film. And I really enjoyed that film. It was one of my favourites, I think, of the festival. In some ways, the plot was quite cliched and predictable, but I think the car chases and action sequences more than made up for it. It was quite a stylish piece. It's like typical tropes, like the older police officer was a mentor to the younger one and teaching him sort of skills and patience and things. But really, even though those were a bit cliche, the sort of filming of it I really enjoyed. I was hooked. I was waiting to see what happens. There's a whole scene in a multi-storey car park, and in some ways you think, how can a kind of car chase in a multi-storey car park be interesting, because, you know, it's only up and down, there's a limited amount of space. But I thought it worked really well, and it was, I haven't seen a scene like that in a multi-storey car park before. Previous, obviously, big car action sequences usually take place on highways, whereas this is quite confined. A lot of it was like in the dark, in alleyways and things, and being kind of turning off your headlights so they can't see you coming and things like that, and I really enjoyed it. So I would definitely recommend Motorway, and I would give that one 4 out of 5. The second film we saw that day was called Six Acts, which was an Israeli film, and there is no way you could sit there and say, oh, I love that film, I really enjoyed it, because it's about a teenage girl who kind of has sex with a few guys, gets labelled a whore, and then a guy who she kind of sees as a boyfriend, but he really isn't, then pressures her to have sex with other people, and including his 12-year-old brother. None of the characters are sympathetic, even the girl herself. She was so frustrating because she puts herself in a lot of these situations. Like, for instance, if someone's not calling you or whatever, or only calls you for sex, then unless that's what you want from a relationship or want from them, you should really take the hint, whereas she was clearly quite insecure, so she just kept putting herself in these situations. And none of the male characters came off well. There were quite clearly rape scenes, so that was very uncomfortable to watch. It was obviously saying stuff about how society views men and women and sex and things like that, because it is a fact of life that if a guy sleeps with 40 girls or whatever, he is labelled a hero and all the other guys look up to him, whereas if a girl sleeps with 40 guys, she is labelled a slut, which is totally unfair, and so it does comment on those double standards. Yeah, like I say, it's very uncomfortable to watch, and all the characters was frustrating. There were no sympathetic ones. All the guys came across as sexist, sex-hungry arseholes, and the girl herself, she came across quite pathetic and, yeah, unsympathetic, because she kept putting herself in these situations when multiple times she could have walked away and avoided them. I would give Six Acts 3 out of 5. The final film we saw, I say we, Erin watched it, but I fell asleep through like an hour of it. It was called Once I Entered a Garden. And this was about the displacement that different people have from like Israel and the countries nearby when there's been conflicts. So they've had to move from Damascus, and they speak Arabic, but they're not allowed to speak Arabic anymore wherever they've had to move to, and then there's conflict with being Jewish and things like that. And it was very hard for someone like me, that I honestly pretty much know nothing about what happens there, which you could say is a bad sign of me being a human interested in my world. But so it's very difficult to watch, because it was like a documentary talking about how these people feel about moving, and one of the men has a young daughter. She was only probably about 10 years old, and how she is saying that some of her class is racist because of her father. She speaks some Arabic and she's not supposed to, so they make fun of her for it. And yeah, like I say, I slept through most of it, so I can't even really comment on it. But I think the subject matter itself is quite hard to watch and understand if you don't know anything about the history. Like some films that deal with historical issues, there's some sort of, I don't know, explanation at the beginning saying, oh, this is what happened, like basic facts, and then they go into it deeper. But there was nothing in this. It's kind of presumed you knew all about it, so therefore it was quite hard to access. I don't even feel as if I can give it a rating out of 5, because, like I said, I slept through most of it. But I would definitely say if you're interested in that part of the world and their history, then I presume it'd be quite interesting for you. But yeah, if you don't know anything about it, then it'd probably be quite hard to watch, because you just don't understand it. So yeah, in all, we saw 17 films in 4 days, which is quite crazy. Well, I suppose technically for me it's 16 because, like I say, I slept through pretty much the entirety of Once I Entered a Garden. I will put a link below to the Edinburgh Film Festival website, as well as links to any of the films' trailers that I've mentioned if they happen to do have trailers. My top films of the festival would be Pluto, The Battle of the Sexes, The Bling Ring, and Motorway. If I'd recommend any to people to watch, it'd be those 4 because I really enjoyed them. They were really entertaining. Things like Pluto made you think. Motorway was like an action film that reminded me in some ways of the Fast and Furious franchise. About the Sexes is so interesting, and if you're a tennis lover, or even if you don't really know tennis that much, but talking about the civil rights movement and things like that and feminism, I thought that was amazing. And yeah, The Bling Ring was just really entertaining. The whole cast was brilliant, and that was just such a fun film. So I've really enjoyed Edinburgh Film Festival. It was amazing, and yeah, I'm looking forward to going maybe next year.